district mentoring team lead this year, and he is going to be working with all of the clubs to help them set up and create amazing mentoring opportunities within the clubs. So tonight's session is really about how to create that mentoring club, and then once a month moving forward, we're going to have more of an educational tip with a facilitated round table discussion. So hopefully you'll be able to join future discussions. But without further ado, I will pass it over to Adam to take it away and lead us through an amazing night. So take it away, Adam.
Well, thank you very much, Tanya, and welcome everyone to this District 61 training event on how to build a mentoring club. Does everybody see my presentation here? Let's see if I can. I'm trying to get it into the right box here, but.
Well,
does everybody see the presentation? Yeah, excellent, great, fantastic. So this is designed to be a kind of an introduction to the mentoring program. It's kind of following a bit the Successful Club series with some tweaks at the end that I think might be helpful for clubs to know in terms of a little bit more concrete in terms of the practical creation of a club. So with that in mind, I just want to, as Tanya said, as we move along, and perhaps maybe you guys can give some feedback at the end of the presentation, we can tailor future monthly calls or videos or workshops to more specific needs in the future. So the idea is to have one a month for the remainder of the Toastmasters season, if you will. So if you have any ideas or particular aspects that you want to work on, or please feel free to contact me. You can get that email. I should have put the email address, I think, on the slide, but it is on the website. If you look at Mentor, you'll pull me up and you'll be able to email me to do that. By way of introductions, I have been a member of Toastmasters since March 2017. I'm a member of two clubs, one French in the downtown core called Leaders en Action, another one at my employer where I work at Bombardier Canada Toastmasters. Before being the district mentor lead, I was served on many executive roles on those clubs, including a non-official role called VP Leadership, which was designed to help the VP education in the mentoring process. And I have, of course, been the area director the last year. So with that, I'd like to, I guess, I'm going to unshare my screen for the moment while I go through maybe the participants, and I'll ask you one by one as I call out your name, if you could please maybe just give your name, your club, and maybe one thing you hope to learn today. Dina, if I pronounce your name correctly, would you mind presenting yourself and perhaps what you expect to get from this club, this session, quickly?
So I'm Dina Salem. I'm from Cataraqui Valley at Kingston, and I'm the mentoring coordinator. It's not the executive position, but I'm working with the VP Ed to develop our mentoring program. So I'm here to learn about how to develop a successful mentoring program.
Excellent, excellent. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lydia Kasprzak. I served as a club coach to complete my requirements for the legacy program. And it has been difficult to set up a mentoring program. So I'm hoping to learn what to do when I'm coaching the next club.
Sounds good, sounds good. Thank you, Lydia. Lucy?
Hello, everyone. I am from Concordia Toastmasters Club, and yesterday I gave a very brief workshop on mentors and mentees. And tonight I am happy to see two of my colleagues with me, and one of them is the VP Mentorship. And I am hoping that we can implement the mentor program in our club.
That's excellent. Good. I hope so too. And if you need any help, of course, I'm always here to support.
Hi, everybody. Norm Hart. I'm from Dina, from Toastmasters at St. Lawrence College. And we've already started our mentoring program. And the first part of it will be tomorrow at our club meeting. And I'm working with the VP Ed, reporting to him. And it probably really won't get rolling too well until we don't have to use Zoom, so we're back in the classroom. In the meantime, it's pretty much one-on-one mentoring as we get new members. And we had a new member, well, he just joined. He came last week. He's already joined, and he and I are going to be the evaluation team for tomorrow.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Hi, everyone. My name is Laura, and I'm the VP Education of the Blackburn Toastmasters meeting. We have an informal mentoring going on, and I'm looking to learn how we can have something formal and well-defined set up.
Good. Okay. Excellent. Sounds good. Scott, you're up.
I'm Scott McLaughlin. I'm the president of Tunney's Toastmasters, and I was with the previous mentoring circle. And the challenge I have with our club is 85% of the club, they have less than a year's experience, and they all want mentors. So we have, very few experienced members, a lot of demand, for mentors. And with the whole pathways transition now basically complete, where do we go from here? How do we kind of spread that knowledge around? Maybe we need a whole different paradigm when it comes to mentoring, with the new pathway system. I don't know, but I'd like to hear that kind of discussion tonight if possible.
I do have a proposal for you in those kinds of situations. It's going to be a little later in the presentation, but we'll get to something that might be interesting for you to see. But so stay tuned.
Shubham, I'm VP Mentorship at Concordia Toastmasters Club. I work with Lucy and Carol, who are also on the call today. I'm excited to see all of you, and I'm here to learn on how to initiate this valuable skill and connect all the new members in our group with experienced members to keep interaction and the response in the group going. So
Fantastic.
Look forward to the presentation today.
Hi. Yes, my name is Carol, and I'm from Concordia Toastmasters. I'm the VP Educations. And today I would like to learn to set up a mentorship program to help together as a team. And it's like our situations are pretty much like Scott. It's like where 80% of people is very new, and they'll be eager to learn. So I'm here to help out to learn how to do setup also.
Hello, everybody. My name's Todd, member of the Dollard Club and a previous member of the last Mentor Circle event.
Yeah. The objective here, again, there's going to be a more of an introduction part to the mentoring process, kind of understanding what we're talking about when we speak of a mentor. What is a mentor and what a mentor does? I'd also like to talk about the mentoring process, kind of maybe even provide a little bit more detail, not a whole lot. I mean, we do have a lot of sessions to go through, but a lot of material to go through, but perhaps a bit of a day-to-day, the mentoring process. And then at the end, we'll provide a bit more ideas as to how perhaps you can think about putting together a mentoring program in your club. Sound good? All right. So without further ado, let's start off with what a mentor is. Okay, and I'd like to share three quotes, the following quotes from Crosby, Spielberg, and Palmer here, which I think really kind of embody what a mentor is. You know, it's someone who we can speak with, right? A brain to pick, ear to listen, someone who we can soundboard off of, and who can kind of take that information and feed it back to us, and pushing us in a certain direction. Okay. And the next part of Spielberg's quote, I think, is very interesting because I fell prey to this when I first started mentoring people at my club at Leaders en Action. It's the idea that we have to be careful that we're not trying to impose or share like what we do and make that and try to get that person to become who we are as a presenter, for example, or even as a leader, but rather to help them, the opportunity to help them pull out the best within themselves, right? And then finally, I think this is also very important, and this is something that I think is we're going to spend some time on a little bit more on this presentation, but it's a relationship. It's not just about the right teacher, but it's also about the right student. You know, sometimes people want mentors, but what they have to be willing to be mentored, I'm going to say, but you know, they have to be willing to learn. So we're talking about someone who takes a personal interest, who serves as a kind of a role model and offers knowledge, you know, in terms of helping someone become successful. Now, I alluded to a mistake I made at the beginning of the process when I was mentoring someone, and that process talks about I kind of acted more as a coach versus a mentor. I know we have some experienced Toastmasters out there, so what I'm going to ask is quickly, I'm going to ask if one person, like the first person who's going to say I or whatever, can tell me what, in a nutshell, in a sentence, the difference between a coach and a mentor.
Coach is result orientated. Mentor is relationship orientated.
I think that's a fair point. I think that's pretty good. We have here, obviously, that we have the idea that the coach is really focused to help push the protege. We use the word protege in Toastmasters for the mentee, if you will, so we'll use protege. Push the mentee in a certain direction, very specific objectives, short-term goals. The mentor is more of a experience, someone, a guide, kind of like a, you know, if you want kind of a guru or a spirit, I don't like the word guru perhaps in this situation, but a guide for the Toastmaster experience, right? Someone who is more long-term oriented, it's more support. It's not there to kind of say, go, do your speech, but more to be there in the background to help support and encourage. So I think that's an important distinction there. To be made. And I'll give you an example. What happened for me was someone would come to me and say, how are you so good with eye contact? And this is back when we were still doing physical presentations. And I was kind of working it through my own way of doing things and who I am as a person without necessarily understanding perhaps some of the challenges and obstacles that first perhaps needed to be addressed with the difficulties in establishing eye contact. Obviously, sometimes there's a cultural issue. Other times there's a variety of neuroses or something like that that could be a problem. So I kind of jumped right in and tried to push the person, and I was very proactive. And I tended, if the person wasn't a go-getter to begin with, that pushed a lot of people away. So it's important to keep that in mind when you're thinking about a mentor and choosing or approaching people or helping people become mentors. So to kind of further reinforce this tune, let's talk about if anybody who had any was a protege. If anybody wants to talk about, shoot off some character traits perhaps that would be conducive to the role of a mentor. Anybody want to share something?
Patience and forethought. The example is when I was finishing up my first year at university, I met my first year political science teacher in the library. He was marking papers, and he, just by luck, he had marked my paper earlier, and he said it was quite good. And you know, I'm just thinking, gee, you know, if I can pass first year university, this would be a great thing, like Latin and a few other things. And he smiled and he said, you know, are you going to do your master's degree in Canadian government? And the thought never crossed my mind. I was still thinking about first year university. And he was actually quite right.
I think that kind of, that's a really good takeaway on things. I think those are some great characteristics. Someone who's able to kind of suss out from their experiencing with you the potential that you have. Someone who has the ability to kind of share that has the knowledge and the ability to kind of put into context where you might go and where you might want to go yourself. I think those are some great some great traits. Anybody else want to share some different traits? We have a couple here that need to be filled out. We have about 4 on this side and 3 on the other. Any other ideas? I think this one's a pretty good one. Good listener, right?
Here's a question for you, Adam.
Sure.
And I apologize if you answered it already. I didn't think I heard it, but question came in on the chat of, do you think the need of membership are more coaching focused or more mentoring focused, which isn't really a trait, but coaching might be a character trait as well.
I think I think that's a good question. In terms of the question itself, what are the needs of the members? That would really come from the circulation of a member survey, what they would feed to you. My experience is that a lot of people come to Toastmasters for a variety of reasons, but namely the communication piece. They stay for the community, they stay for the that kind of stuff, but they come because they want to try to improve themselves. So usually it tends to be they don't necessarily know what it is that it means to be a good communicator. And so at the beginning, I would say that there would be a more supportive aspect to kind of, so in other words, a more mentoring kind of aspect, someone to help support in terms of helping them find their way. But ultimately, what we tend to find out is that there tends to be a need to coach a certain thing. For example, a lot of people really want to work on eye contact. So it could be at first I feel like that it needs to be an exposure, and they need someone to help that transition. So, and then after that, it could work in tandem. You could have a coach and you could have a mentor at the same time. But there tends to be a desire to fulfill a certain need, and the mentor can help support that objective to be the coach, or and if you don't have a lot of people, that person can also be the coach. But I don't know if that answers your question, but I would say that certainly the ability to be a mentor is a good requirement for new members. Certainly. I'll quickly go through some of the other characteristic traits here, just list them. And I think these kind of go for without saying, but of course, one of the big ones is availability. I think this is something that we struggle with as Toastmasters from a variety of perspectives, especially people who are part of our community and who are professionals or who have a young family. That could be a challenge, but I do have some ways in terms of recruiting mentors, some potential aspects that could be interesting to help people who may want to be a mentor but don't have the time to kind of maybe consider some of those aspects. So this kind of encapsulates what a mentor is, right? Is someone there to listen, support, help extricate the best in someone, and who's there willing to work on a relationship. Someone who has concern and knowledge, certainly knowledge of the Toastmasters program pathways and the club's processes, be it systems that they use like Free Toast Host, if they use Easy Speak or some other system. We looked a bit about what a mentor is and now I want to talk about what a mentor does. And I think I'll just kind of accelerate through this, especially since we're kind of running a little bit behind schedule. And I think it's fairly straightforward, right? What a mentor does is essentially accelerates the learning process depending on where the person finds themselves within their Toastmasters experience. So you can have new members and you can have experienced members. Now, of course, I think Scott brought up the idea, I think it was Scott who said that the majority of his members are new members, and that could be a bit of a challenge in that aspect, but certainly there's some older members that can be helpful for other older members. We'll talk another possibility in another minute, but we're talking about, the mentor really helps the person get involved into understand the program, understand what can be done, helps develop their confidence, and really helps someone get going into that program as opposed to having no one. I know from my own experience at Leaders en Action, there wasn't an official mentoring program, and it's a bit like, what is this Easy Speak? What is this? I don't understand. Like, I had to go out and find it myself, and that was a challenge. And I like that challenge, but there's a lot of people who don't appreciate that. Experienced members, of course, obviously there's the refining the skills, and we can talk about there's people who coach or help mentor in the contest process. And that has nothing to say for what is available once you realize that Toastmasters is an organization and that we have a district and that there's an international organization and that the opportunities that are available. If that is discovered, there is tremendous opportunity for further involvement for people. I've lived it in my clubs, and I think that's something that might not be necessarily advertised, but you can certainly have people who support that, and you can really get experienced members going and fired up again because of the possibilities that this offers and the real skills you can develop, for professional life. The next part is the mentoring process, and here I want to give a little bit more insight into, like, I guess the more nitty gritty of what we kind of look at in terms of a mentorship relationship. So I look at it as a 3-step approach, right? And if you want an acronym, I give you UDF: understand, develop, and refine. Very simple. So you have the understanding process, right? I think that's pretty self-explanatory. You have a development where you, we'll get into all the nitty-gritty in a bit, but the development where you kind of build on your understanding, and then you refine and you kind of move on to greater things. So I think the real crux is in the understanding, okay? And what the first thing usually is of interest, and I know the clubs I've been a part of haven't done this, but I would suggest making sure that your members fill out the Toastmaster the member interest survey. That would give some insight into the members' needs. And when you pair a mentor and a mentee, it's important that they understand those needs. So an understanding is a 2-part process. The first part is the relationship, having that exchange. So you can call that the first meeting, where you have that exchange of some personal details, the needs and wants, maybe even a couple of personal anecdotes. You establish a communication methodology, right? How are you going to communicate? Usually you can do whatever method works for those people. And the timeline, the term, and this is important. And I think this is something that we can talk about again, moving in the next slide here. Really, it's important that the mentorship relationship have a term that if for any reason it doesn't go well, or something's not going very smoothly, that there's a natural escape plan, if you will, for lack of a better word. And so we'll talk about, in terms of setting up for new members, it might be that you have like a very kind of limited, for the first 3 speeches and pathways, for example, so that, they get in there, they have that initial understanding, and then they can continue and they get to know other members. We'll get into that in a second. But there is that important to have that term there. And you can kind of gauge that based on your interest. Now, obviously, once the member is integrated and knows the other members, the mentor tends to take care of itself. So you can have, like, someone will go to a mentor themselves and have someone work with them for a while, and they can establish that. But it's important to keep that in mind, especially for new members. And the second part is really understanding is here the mentor kind of provides a basic orientation of the club. How it runs, how to use pathways to get, log in and get all that thing going. Of course, you can have like training materials that are available there to use and just answer questions. You don't actually have to go through the whole process, but it's helpful to have that support. The protocols and all that kind of stuff, how to sign up and all, and basically help with the icebreaker. So that kind of is like, that could be a 1 meeting kind of event for the process, or you can break it up into 2 meetings, depending on how the timeline and time works, what times are available. But it's important to get that understanding of who the person is. And when because your members of the club, who's available to mentor, if you know what the kind of needs are of the mentee, and we can talk about that more fully in another session. But if you know what the mentors, what the protege requires, you're able to find out, you're able to match them with the club. So that mentor survey can be very helpful. Of course, and a brief meeting of 10 minutes even with a member by the person responsible can also be very helpful. So that's kind of the understanding part of it. The development here, we're talking about, really talking about making sure now that the person's kind of getting along, they know that the resources available. If you have a club library of information, if you the district resources on District 61, there's some bunch of resources there. TI has a bunch of resources, of course. Here we're providing feedback, starting to provide some feedback to the speeches, right? I think the icebreaker is a bit more gentle, and then you have some more specific points as you're building along. And you kind of explain the responsibilities in terms of, if you sign up for a role, please show up and do the role. Try not to cancel at the last minute, that kind of stuff, to help them kind of understand that. So now we're kind of looking at, if you, depending on how long your mentorship is, in your development phase, we're talking about probably around here, I'd say, in my experience, around maybe 4-ish to 5-ish meetings, depending on how you how you handle it. And the next part is the refinement, right? This is where this is my favorite part. My biggest success was when I got to a point where the protege was like, you know, we were learning from each other, right? This is the kind of play where you kind of become equals. You're sharing your Toastmaster story. You're encouraging visiting other clubs, getting to know the real Toastmaster experience that we all know and love, the events, the district, maybe even trying to, you know, maybe talking about if they want to experience leadership, club officer roles. So that's the kind of the process, the kind of walkthrough of the relationship. If you have a kind of a traditional mentoring relationship, of course, if you kind of go the route where I was suggesting originally, where you might have like a 3, session initial kind of contract, if you will. I think in that kind of sense, you might have a bit of a challenge here, but to get through the whole process. But you can see the general process that we're talking about when we're talking about mentees. Having said that, I think it's important that you consider that you also think in terms of, for people who might think this is a heavy burden, that you might consider the buddy system, where you have kind of like a partnership as opposed to like, or like someone to kind of, call it more of a buddy as opposed to a mentor, to kind of lighten the load. That maybe all this particular parts, obviously you have to tell them how your program, your club works, but maybe you want to have especially for new mentors, you might want to lighten it up. Is there any kind of questions on that before we go into the next part of where I think you might have some ideas for structuring the programs?
Adam, I do have a question for you. Has anyone had success with requiring members to act as a mentor once they've gotten to a certain point, or is it better to let mentors be strictly volunteers?
So from my experience, unfortunately, in the majority of cases, people don't seem to step up to the plate until they're asked. For a variety of reasons, mainly other obligations and things of that nature. And I'm going to get to a point in the presentation where I propose a way of working with that and actually going out and trying to get traction and getting people to help with volunteers. I have some ideas in terms of recruitment. Building a mentor program. Now, of course, this is the VP Education's kind of mandate, but as I said, we talked about it being delegated. You heard some people on the call already talking about it. I'm responsible for the mentoring program. I did the unofficial role of leadership. So you can, of course, delegate that kind of responsibility to someone else. And I think the first thing is when you're thinking about a mentor program, I would advise that you would need to figure out putting some time aside for them to meet, be it before the club meeting or after, if possible. If you can reserve your room, or if you can have access to the room 30 minutes before or 30 minutes after, or both, or even 15 minutes, if I don't know, whatever can work, that would go a long way to help facilitate that relationship, because sometimes it's hard to organize schedules outside of that Toastmaster meeting. And having that time, and I was most available right after the Toastmaster meeting, and that was a big help. But we had to go somewhere else in the hallway to do it. Thinking about, can we set some time aside? Can we, I don't know if you have an agreement with whatever room you're renting, can you have more time or less time, depending on what time of day you meet and all that kind of stuff. I think that's very important off the bat. I want to talk a bit about structures. And I had a couple ideas here. I mean, you have the traditional structure, right? You have the one-on-one, which when you go to Toastmasters, when you go through the materials, they'll tell you that there's a one-on-one type of relationship. But that might not necessarily work, Scott, in your situation. I think it was Scott again. What might work better for you is a coach's corner, where you have a one-to-many type of situation. And an idea came from the mentor circle, one of the people who started the mentor circle, where she actually had a session where she would serve as a kind of a guide, and help and have people act out mentor scenarios where they would try to develop their mentoring skills, or she would also have sessions where she would be able to mentor multiple people at the same time who had similar issues, for example, to the point where they met every week, but then they changed it such that they would have the first and third week of the month as a regular meeting, and the second and fourth week of the month as a special mentor meeting. that's an idea. Whether it passes muster or doesn't, that's one way to do it. Another way is for people with minimal resources, perhaps, is crowdsourcing. And this is something that I kind of thought of when my experience with Leaders en Action. One thing I implemented was, you had some people who were particularly gifted at certain things. Some people were very good at pathways out of the gate. Some people were very good with what we use to register for our clubs, Easy Speak, right out of the gate. And we could kind of use those resources to help with particular needs. Of course, this might not go towards the actual communication abilities. That might be a different kettle of fish, but you do have someone there to help support the integration in the club. And in my case, I had people who were very, very proactive in terms of feedback and trying to come and encourage to do other things. So crowdsourcing, where you have many people who have different abilities to help the new members, could be a thing to think about as well, in terms of structuring how you want to go about supporting that integration of the new members into your club more specifically. For longer, different older members, obviously the traditional one-to-one probably is better. But the last one I kind of have in mind is not as effective, in my opinion, but outsourcing. And you can speak with, we're going to think about considering putting in place, again, trying to get people in the district, availability for people in the district to act as mentors. That's obviously limited. I would also recommend club presidents and BP eds and mentor people reach out to your area directors and they can reach out to me, or we can work and collaborate, and they can find maybe people in the area who might be willing to help. Because sometimes geographical locations, actually seeing that person, I know we're in COVID and whatever, but proximity and the ability to meet face to face, even if it's 2 meters apart over a coffee in the park, it's getting colder, but whatever, could be much more beneficial than a virtual discussion session where it's harder to judge things. So those are some ideas of ways you can consider structuring your program if you have fewer members, or if you have fewer people who have that ability to be mentors. Does anybody else have any structure that they have used that they can think of that they might have tried to put in place and that they have had some success with in terms of a mentoring program? For those of you who have mentoring programs in your clubs or worked on that?
Actually, if you allow me, Adam, actually we have a sort of a systematic mentoring thing. With any new member that joins our club, we provide him with a mentor from the through the gate. So you are a new member, this is your mentor. For new ones, for old members or members that have been there for a while, we tried to do this, but we're not yet on the right track. We didn't start it formally or officially, but for the new ones, we have mentors. Yeah,
that's great. I'm thrilled to hear it that you have that availability in that club. I think one of the challenges some people have, they don't necessarily have the bandwidth of having that. And sometimes it's great that you have that proactivity in your club. I'm really happy to hear that. And we're going to talk about perhaps trying to figure out, I'm going to quickly have to keep going here to kind of move on with some of my tactics for recruiting. But yeah, when you come on, having that initial new member have someone to orient them for, maybe even just an icebreaker, because it really, I think what's important is in the mentoring relationship is that person needs to feel comfortable with the person they're working with, and just assigning them someone for long term, like, just saying this is your mentor and there's no term to that, can be a bit intimidating and it may not be as a success. But I'm happy it works for you. That's fantastic. Really good to hear that. So quickly, we're running out of time. One of the big things that we talked about was, Tanya had that question, should it be voluntary or should we go out and be more proactive? I think the answer is we need to be proactive. And I think the most effective way to get people to be part of your board, to be more participative, is to go out and pitch it to them individually. Go out there and recognize that person for the value they bring to their club. You give that person that value. You give that person that feeling of, oh, wow, I'm special. And you're going to have a higher success rate. right? You're going to convert. You're going to have a higher rate to convert, especially if they understand the process. And just so you know, there is in Pathways, every path on the second project has an introduction to mentorship project that you can do. Upon successful completion, it opens up a new path for mentorship path. So there is additional training specific for mentors that's available through the Pathways program for those who want to be mentors as of the second level in any Pathways path. I think that's important to know. So quickly, obviously, when you're pitching this to people, I think one of the things you need to remember is that you can always pitch the fact that that this will help them develop their skills. I found that when I was able to communicate my ability, like some of the things that I learned, it helped reinforce that and add to that in my experience. You can read the rest of the skills, but I think the biggest pitch is anybody who wants to be in leadership, probably anybody who has kids, I would imagine also, anybody who wants to build someone up, who needs to support someone, can benefit from being a mentor. It's a soft skill development that will pay dividends no matter what in the rest of your life. That is, in my experience, and anybody who's been a mentor, I think, let me know if you disagree. But that is the biggest selling pitch. If you want to grow and become, yourself, that's the biggest in soft skill development right there. But most importantly, never forget to recognize the proteges, success, recognize the mentors for being part of it. It's very important to get that recognition. Leaders en Action, for example, we have a Toastmaster of the Month. We had a ceremony at the end of the year to recognize people officially, like the best, all that kind of stuff. We do what we can to make people feel special, valued for their contribution, and that, I think, pays dividends more above than anything else. So when you're setting up that program, think about having time before and after the meeting, if possible, to try and have that time for people to use, be a help to kind of lighten the burden. Consider a kind of a short program. I think Dina had talked about pairing someone immediately, but maybe make sure the term is a bit on a shorter side so that you have a natural exit plan. And remember, the exit plan is important, that we kind of figure that out. If you're having problems finding people, there are different ways to do it, to structure it. You can think about having, like, for example, even sharing a role in a meeting. Like, I would share my role of president or Toastmaster with a new member so that I would do part of it, they would do part of it. So you can have a many-to-one, anybody's specialties, expertise, and even, relatively new members can sometimes demonstrate expertise, and they can act in some way in the crowdsourcing scenario. And you can have the coach's corner scenario as well. Never forget to recognize and really go up to those people to recruit them, make them feel special. And I think you'll see that you're going to have a higher click-through rate, a higher success rate than you thought. It's a little unnerving, but it's a great leadership tool for you to develop as well. So that sums it up. I know it was a bit of a kind of a rapid fire there on that sense. We looked at the kind of the basics of what a mentor is, what a mentor does, the mentoring program structures, and recruiting members. Does anybody quickly, I know we're kind of running out of time here, but I would like to know, does anybody have any questions? What I'll do
Here's
is
a question that came in here quickly.
Yeah.
Is any suggestion of concise resources to share with the mentor? I find our people need a clear path to follow, how often to meet, etc.
That is a fair question, and we can put something together to try and kind of give a better understanding of that. I just circulated the survey for feedback, by the way, in the chat. The challenge is that really depends a lot. I mean, to impose a structure on people, we can have like a template of how to work and proposal to use, but sometimes that can be overwhelming for people. So yes, we can put that together and try to figure out something on how to work that and share that resource. I think going by the general guidelines of the UDF, understand, develop, and refine, UDR, gives you some general guidelines on that to guide, to understand and to share the program and make sure that person's comfortable. And then have those times to develop and then have those other meetings. Sometimes it's a natural organic process. But if that's something that you guys need and would like to have a better understanding to give you a bit more concrete, sure, we can work on that. I'm not sure there's a resource available currently, but we can certainly work on that for you.
Thank you so much, Adam, for leading us through that, and I look forward to the next one.
Thank you, Tanya, and thank you all. I really appreciate your participation this evening.